In the previous game, we just played against the Verisov setup. Now we are going to be playing with the Verisov setup. And here I'm going to go knight to b5, very common move. Our opponent goes knight a6. Now here, I think most people play pawn to e3. I did see Joe Bava himself, after whom the system is named, played a3 in some of these positions. So that's what I'm going to do, just preventing anything from coming to b4. I think, commonly I see opponents in this position go for c5. More passive would be knight to c7. But okay, bishop d6, I think we'll just stick with our e3. Note that I'm willing to accept the doubled pawns in this position. Totally okay with that. Because we get really tight control of the e5 square with this approach. Okay, knight e4, very, very early knight e4. Interesting by our opponent. This allows us the opportunity to take and go knight g5, which I'm not sure why our opponent is allowing us to do this. They can go pawn to f5, but that weakens their position quite considerably. I think I'm going to go for this. I'm going to see what my opponent has in mind. So knight g5, if queen to d5, I figure we can play c4. And queen a5, we have b4. All of our pawns are getting pushed up. If queen f5, then we go g4. We keep pushing and pushing. So f5 makes a lot of sense. Now, our opponent is going to castle on the next move. So I'm thinking this is a good opportunity to start being annoying. Maybe queen to h5, queen h6, stopping our opponent from castling. This gives up this pawn. We can go rook d1. Queen takes on b2. And do we have anything there? Knight takes h7 becomes playable. And now we're threatening queen takes g6. So a lot of interesting opportunities here. I don't want to miss the opportunity to go queen h5, that's for sure. If we miss the opportunity, then our opponent's just going to castle on the next turn and be super solid. Okay, let's say we go bishop c4, castles, queen h5, h6, h4. Yeah, I can try to weasel my queen in, but our opponent always has solid moves like queen e8 in these positions, trying to force a queen trade. So I don't love it. Okay, queen h5, g6, queen h6, queen takes d4, rook d1. Queen takes b2, knight takes h7, queen c3 check, rook d2, queen a1 check, king e2. Okay, I like it. I think I'm going to do it. I think this gives us a pretty strong attack. All right, we'll go queen h6. Oh, our opponent does not even take the d4 pawn. What is going on here? Okay, interesting. I think we're going to go bishop c4. One of the big reasons being, if our opponent goes knight d5, I'm potentially interested in snapping off this knight. It does fix our opponent's pawn structure, but then we're left with good knight versus bad bishop. And that is an imbalance that I'm pretty interested in playing. So I'll snap off this knight and I'll go pawn to h4. And now here, our opponent can try to sort of break through like this, but we can just ignore it. So if our opponent goes e3, we go h5. Okay, so our opponent chooses to force the queen trade. We are obliged to accept an h5, so we can just continue here. And yeah, this was my idea, that I would want to take this position with the imbalance, good knight versus bad bishop, and even though I was fixing my opponent's pawn structure, I don't know if I've ever seen such a massive pawn triangle. Even though I was fixing my opponent's structure I end up getting a decent position. So, okay. Here I'm going to go h6. Now our opponent's rook is kind of tied down to this pawn for the remainder of the game, and we can start bringing our king in as well. So I'm looking at opportunities to make the king more active. Okay, yeah, I mean, king e3 is very solid. Now my king is also kind of like one of the pawns. Yeah, I'm not surprised our opponent is going to try to play for this sort of c5 break. That's a very understandable thing to do in this position. I can go b4, trying to clamp down on it, or I can allow my opponent to play for this move. I think I'm going to allow my opponent to play for it. Pawn to c5, and yeah, we'll see how they choose to proceed. Okay, so now our opponent might be looking to double up with this rook protecting the h7 pawn. Again, very reasonable. If I could get my knight to e5, that'd be awesome. I can also try to open this rook's file. So a4, a5, this sort of strategy. I want to get my pieces active somehow, and right now I'm not seeing a super clear path to activity for my pieces. Okay. Rook to b8. Now my opponent is preparing. If I play a5, he'll potentially take, and then take this guy. So, all right, we can go rook d2, just get ahead of our opponent's plan. Now, our opponent, I'm looking mostly at the c5 move, which our opponent does play. I think a5 is reasonable. This is what we had been prepping for, so that's what we're going to do. Very in line with our strategy of pushing p on the queen side. And now our opponent locks it down. Okay. Very, very interesting. So even though we have the knight in this position, our opponent is going for a fully closed setup. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and take. And here I'm not overly concerned about our situation on the on this side of the board. I might actually opt to bring my king back this way, because our king doesn't really need to do anything on e3. I was considering situations where if our opponent had taken, I would take with the king, but now that our opponent has like totally closed down this position, now I no longer see a need to do that. Okay, rook here. Now I actually kind of like king d1, just ignoring the threat altogether, with the idea that if our opponent does go for this trade, then he abandons this pawn over here in the corner. That's pretty enticing to me. I wonder if our opponent will take the bait. Let's go for it. I'm picturing in... Oh, oops, that's not legal. I'm picturing in some positions our opponent will go back bishop g8. Okay, let's go rook a2. Now my plan is to do this whole situation. King c2, rook d1, rook a1. Just a lot of maneuvering. Yep, king c2. We'll continue like this. Okay, now our opponent has backed off slightly, so we can enter the position even further. I'm looking at rook b4. I think this is very reasonable. Trading in this position should favor us, since we want to get rid of this very active rook. This is our opponent's best piece right now. So if we can go rook b4, takes, it does ruin our pawn structure a bit, but we might be willing to accept that. I just want to be careful of, like, okay, if our opponent goes bishop to d7 and then I do this trade, then there may be bishop b5, which I don't want. Oh, but bishop d7, there's actually knight takes h7. Very nice little intermediate move with check, and now that unlocks our pass pawn. So that would be good for us. That would be even winning if our opponent goes for this bishop d7. Oh, our opponent abandoned the game. Okay, well, this was quite good for us.